Wedged between Poland and Lithuania on the windswept shores of the Baltic Sea lies Kaliningrad, a Russian exclave entirely separated from the rest of Russia by hundreds of kilometers. This small but significant territory is a geopolitical anomaly, a fragment of Russia surrounded by European Union and NATO countries, making it a unique and strategic outpost for Moscow. Kaliningrad was once the historic German city of Königsberg, a center of culture and learning for centuries. After World War II, the city was captured by the Soviet Union, its German population forcibly expelled and replaced by Soviet citizens from across the USSR. The city's architecture, culture, and even its name were transformed to erase its German past. Renamed in honor of Bolshevik leader Mikhail Kalinin, the region became a closed military zone, off-limits to foreigners and even most Soviet citizens. It quickly developed into a vital port for the Soviet Baltic Fleet, bristling with military infrastructure and shrouded in secrecy throughout the Cold War. When the Soviet Union collapsed in 1991, Kaliningrad was suddenly isolated, surrounded on all sides by newly independent states that would soon join NATO and the EU. This new reality only increased its strategic importance for Russia, turning it into a forward outpost in the heart of Europe. Today, Kaliningrad is one of the most heavily militarized regions in Europe. It hosts Russia's powerful Baltic Fleet, advanced S-400 air defense systems, and nuclear-capable Iskander missiles, all positioned within striking distance of European capitals. These formidable assets create a dense anti-access and area denial bubble over the Baltic region, complicating any potential NATO operations, and making the area a focal point for military planners on both sides. Kaliningrad's heavily fortified borders, constant military patrols, and tense checkpoints underscore its role as a flashpoint, its isolation and military might making it one of the most sensitive and closely watched frontiers between Russia and the West. The fate of this exclave is deeply intertwined with the broader contest for security, influence, and stability in Europe, as leaders on both sides weigh their next moves. In times of crisis, Kaliningrad's presence ensures that tensions can escalate rapidly, with consequences that could ripple far beyond its borders, shaping the future of European security for years to come. In July 2025, tensions spiked at the LandEuro Conference, a gathering that had already drawn global attention due to the ongoing instability in Eastern Europe and the shadow of the Ukraine conflict. It was here that General Christopher Donahue, the head of U.S. Army Europe, took the stage and made a statement that would reverberate far beyond the conference walls. Donahue declared that NATO could seize the Russian exclave of Kaliningrad in a time frame that is unheard of, if the situation demanded it, a direct public warning to Moscow that left little room for misinterpretation. He stressed that NATO's planning and military capabilities, now deeply informed by hard-won lessons from the war in Ukraine, had reached a new level of readiness, allowing the alliance to challenge Kaliningrad's formidable defenses with unprecedented speed and precision. This marked a significant shift in NATO's posture, from a primarily defensive stance focused on deterrence to a clear willingness to launch rapid offensive operations if Russia were to attack any NATO member state. The message was unmistakable. NATO is now prepared not only to defend its territory, but to take decisive action to neutralize Russian threats at the very outset of any conflict, aiming to prevent escalation before it can spiral out of control. Delivered at a major international military forum, Donahue's statement was a calculated and deliberate signal to both allies and adversaries. NATO is no longer content to simply react to Russian moves, but is now actively setting its own red lines and terms of engagement. The threat to seize Kaliningrad represented a dramatic escalation in rhetoric and intent, designed to reset the balance of deterrence in Eastern Europe and force Moscow to reconsider its own strategies. It was a bold and risky move, but one calculated to demonstrate to Moscow and the world that the strategic landscape in Europe had fundamentally changed, and that NATO was ready to act decisively if provoked. Donahue's warning reflected NATO's new Eastern Flank Deterrence Line, the alliance's biggest strategic overhaul since the Cold War. Spurred by Russia's 2022 invasion of Ukraine, NATO shifted from reinforcing after an attack to denying aggression from the start. This means more troops and heavy equipment permanently stationed in Poland, Lithuania, Latvia, and Estonia. The goal: eliminate delays, ensure immediate defense, and make any Russian attack futile. NATO is also pushing for industrial mobilization, ramping up munitions production, standardizing equipment, and integrating digital systems for faster battlefield decisions. The message to Moscow is clear. Any attack on NATO's eastern members would be catastrophic for Russia. The alliance is building a fortress on its eastern border, determined to deter any aggression. The post-Cold War peace is over. Russia is now officially seen as Europe's most direct threat. Moscow's response to NATO's threat was immediate and chilling. Russian officials declared any attack on Kaliningrad would be treated as an attack on Russia itself, crossing a red line that could trigger nuclear retaliation. This was not veiled language. Russia's doctrine allows nuclear use if the state's existence is threatened, and losing Kaliningrad would qualify. The nuclear warning is meant to force NATO to weigh the risk of escalation to the unthinkable. The crisis over Kaliningrad is now a direct confrontation between conventional and nuclear deterrence. The Baltic region is now one of the world's most militarized zones, where the presence of powerful armed forces on both sides has transformed the landscape. Once known for its tranquil forests and coastlines, the area is now defined by military infrastructure, constant surveillance, and a sense of ever-present tension. Kaliningrad is a fortress, home to the Russian Baltic Fleet, the 11th Army Corps, S-400 air defenses, Bastion anti-ship missiles, and nuclear-capable Iskander systems. This heavily fortified exclave is one of the most strategically significant military outposts in Europe, bristling with advanced weaponry and acting as a forward base for Russian power projection. These assets threaten NATO's air, land, and sea operations across the region. The reach of Kaliningrad's missiles extends deep into neighboring countries, creating a constant challenge for NATO planners and raising the risk of rapid escalation in any crisis. In response, NATO has built up robust forces in Poland and the Baltic states, deploying multinational battle groups with tanks, artillery, and air defenses. These deployments are designed to deter aggression and reassure allies, with regular joint exercises sharpening readiness and interoperability. Poland is rapidly modernizing its military, investing in new equipment and technology to strengthen its defenses. Meanwhile, NATO's air policing and naval presence have grown stronger, with fighter jets and warships patrolling the skies and waters to maintain vigilance. The addition of Finland and Sweden to NATO has turned the Baltic Sea into a NATO lake, surrounding Kaliningrad from the sea. This expansion has dramatically shifted the regional balance, closing off potential escape routes and tightening the strategic noose around Russian forces. The combined might of regional and U.S. forces gives NATO confidence in its ability to isolate Kaliningrad if conflict erupts. Coordination between American, European, and local militaries is at an all-time high, with command centers and rapid response units on constant alert. The military balance here is precarious. Both sides are ready, and the stakes are enormous. Every movement is watched, every signal analyzed, as both NATO and Russia prepare for any eventuality in this tense standoff. Any miscalculation could trigger a rapid and devastating escalation, making the Baltic region one of the most dangerous flashpoints in Europe today. The Suwalki Gap, a narrow corridor between Poland and Lithuania, is NATO's most vulnerable land link to the Baltic states. Flanked by Kaliningrad and Belarus, it's a prime target in any conflict. Russia could try to cut off Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania from the rest of NATO. Securing the Suwalki Gap is a top priority. NATO has stationed multinational battle groups and conducts regular exercises to keep the corridor open. For Russia, the gap is the land bridge separating Kaliningrad from Belarus and the Russian mainland. Both sides see it as critical, and each side's defensive moves are viewed as offensive threats by the other. This mutual suspicion fuels a dangerous cycle of escalation in a confined, high-stakes area. The Suwalki Gap is a flashpoint. Its fate could determine the outcome of any Baltic conflict. The world's attention is fixed on this narrow strip of land. The war in Ukraine is shaping the new standoff over Kaliningrad. NATO has learned the value of well-trained, tech-equipped ground forces and the need for rapid digital integration. Ukraine's use of Western weapons and Russia's struggles have informed NATO's confidence in challenging Kaliningrad's defenses. The vulnerability of air defenses to drones and missiles has changed military calculations on both sides. Russia, meanwhile, has adapted, improving electronic warfare, fortifying defenses, and ramping up drone and artillery production. The Kremlin now sees itself in an existential struggle with the West. making Kaliningrad's defense non-negotiable. The psychological impact of the war has deepened mistrust, making de-escalation harder. Western intelligence now warns that Russia could directly threaten NATO within 5 years, driving the alliance's urgent military buildup. The Kaliningrad crisis is fueled by irreconcilable worldviews. NATO sees its buildup as a defensive response to Russian aggression, especially after Ukraine. For Eastern European members, reinforcing defenses is about survival, not provocation. Russia, however, views NATO's expansion and deployments as a betrayal and a direct threat. The Kremlin frames the military buildup as proof of Western hostility and encirclement. This narrative justifies Russia's own actions and hardens domestic support for confrontation. Each side interprets the other's moves in the worst possible light, fueling a spiral of escalation. The result? A deepening mistrust that makes compromise and de-escalation ever more elusive. The standoff over Kaliningrad is Europe's most dangerous crisis since the Cold War. It's not just a regional dispute, it's where the interests of the world's two largest nuclear powers collide. Any conflict here would likely trigger NATO's Article 5, pitting Russia against the full alliance. The risk of nuclear escalation is real. A desperate Russia might see tactical nuclear use as its only option. The global fallout would be catastrophic economic collapse, humanitarian disaster, and environmental ruin. The fate of Kaliningrad is a test of leadership, restraint, and diplomacy for Washington, Brussels, and Moscow. The path to escalation is clear. The challenge is to find an off-ramp before disaster strikes. Understanding the other side's fears and red lines is essential, even amid deep disagreement. Kaliningrad is a stark reminder. Great power conflict, with all its dangers, is no longer a relic of the past.